So, all right, we've whittled it down that the big problems here are there's a little bit of traffic and a salmon avocado roll could be hard to come by. So I think it's doing all right. But obviously all of this has a little something to do with the guy that's been in charge for the last couple of years. We all had the pleasure of having dinner at the governor's mansion with Ron DeSantis about a month and a half ago. Totally open. It was off the record conversation, so we're not going to repeat anything that was said, but just struck me as just like a really, really decent guy who does not want to be king. That was my main takeaway of the night. Like, he does not want to rule over people. He'd like people to be free. We could have pulled a gajillion clips of him doing it right over the last 2 years. We've got this one on children and masks and mandates. Take a look.
These kids are so much happier being able to go to school without having to wear masks for 8 hours a day. So when you start to see them kind of reevaluate or say all this, just understand this. The science didn't change. Well, the medical science didn't change. The political science changed. They feel the heat. They know that voters have been tired of perpetual lockdown policies. They know that they have basically offered no off-ramp, and they know that they're fixing to get whooped at the polls. And so that's what's causing the epiphany. But the fact of the matter is, if they had looked at the actual science from the beginning, they would have known that this was something that Florida was right on.
Karol, let me start with you on that one because you basically moved here for your kids, as we talked about a second ago. Can you just talk about, having them out of the masks, be free, just their general state? I read a study yesterday or the day before about the speech issues that kids are now having because literally their mouth muscles are not developing the way they are supposed to, and they can't see the teachers' mouths, so they can't mimic things, and it's going to delay speech for years.
It's just like anybody who's ever met a child knew that was going to happen. Like, I don't understand how that's even like news, but so many people were ringing that alarm for so long, and we were obviously all dismissed. But, about the governor, like, I feel very defensive of him. I do get into like arguments all the time on his behalf, and it is not because I like him as a politician, although yes, I do. It's because I feel like he stands up for literally me, like for me, for my family. I feel like he's actually in the fight, like to help us specifically. I really can't think of a situation where I felt that way before. Like, the only like even comparable thing to me is like how much I credited Rudy Giuliani with turning New York City around, and how I felt like that made a real tangible difference in my life, that I could ride the subway at night or, any number of things. And this is like the only time in my life where I think a politician has had such a direct effect on what happens in my life and on behalf of my children, that I just feel like I have to constantly go to bat for him because he's protecting me, and I think I owe him the same kind of protection. And it's as a constituent, not as a journalist. I feel very strongly for him as a constituent.
Yeah, I feel the same way. John, when we were talking to him, and again, we can't say anything that was private, not that we said anything that shouldn't have been said publicly, but that was just the nature of the dinner. The thing that really struck me was how he kind of was just like, I just didn't feel that I should listen to groupthink and I should do what I thought was right. Like, that's kind of how I want to lead. That, in essence, was it. Like, that's pretty freaking special these days, huh?
Yeah, and I love that Karol equated Ron DeSantis to Rudy Giuliani because, I say this often on social media. Those are two guys who hate politicians. And if you hate politicians, you're a good politician. I've always said the next Republican president who comes in, the next conservative, should find a pool of people who hate DOJ, FBI, CIA, NSA. And whoever of that pool hates those agencies the most, there's your secretary, there's your director. And I think a guy like DeSantis hates bureaucracy. I've been around his team and him for many years operating politically down here in Florida. And they aren't just apolitical, they're anti-political. In fact, I had a conversation that night with his chief of staff, and it's something he said very publicly. Ron DeSantis isn't beholden to polls. He doesn't make decisions based on polling. He makes them based on science and what's best for the people of the state of Florida, his constituents, or when he was a congressman, his congressional district. We need more like that. And Karol's 100% right. He is an act for her, for me, for you, for the
Dave, you've been.
I think it's interesting that the four of us now lived in, all four of us here lived in New York City under Giuliani, and all of us, are obviously here under DeSantis, and that parallel that you know Karol and John mentioned was absolutely apt. You know, there's no better there's no better analog for it in American politics. Certainly not, you know, in any city.
So the $1 million question that everybody's asking is, you know, is he going to run for president? And I hate doing too much of just like the racehorse politics kind of thing, but I've been very clear about this a couple times on the show and on Twitter. I don't want him to run for president. I think the governor matters way more. I would like to keep this state right. Let's keep modeling this thing right. You know, he's only been governor for a couple of years. It's not even like he's been doing this for that long. It's like, let's keep this right. I also think Biden is so damaged that whether it's Trump or whoever, it's like there's a really good chance. And obviously the midterms seem like they're going to make some sense, or at least, you know, push some of this wave of insanity back a bit.